In less than 5 hours, the man who had pointed a 13-year-old boy toward the junior exhibition corridor was sitting in the 5th row of the final round watching that same boy make a room of 200 people go completely quiet. He had looked him over in the registration line, the public school blazer with the loose button, the composition notebook held against his chest with both hands, the folded registration confirmation softened at its creases from being opened and closed so many times it had taken on the texture of cloth, and he had made his assessment with the comfortable certainty of a man whose assessments had never cost him anything. He was wrong about Marcus Osei before the boy spoke a single word in competition. He would spend a long time understanding how wrong. The Pacific Coast Regional Schools Debate Championship came to Whitmore Preparatory Academy every October the same way it had for 16 years. The registration tables went up in the main atrium on Friday evening. The bracket sheets were posted on an easel near the main competition hall doors by 8 Saturday morning. The trophy, hand-carved oak base, brass plate engraved with the previous year's winner, sat in a glass display case near the entrance, visible to every student, coach, and family who passed through those doors from October to October. For the last 3 years, the name on the plate had been Ethan Hallowell. Gregory Hallowell had arranged the first sponsorship of this competition 12 years ago, the year his son was born. His firm's letterhead appeared on the tournament's formal correspondence. The registration packets were printed on paper embossed with Hallowell and Associates in the bottom right corner. The competition's official website listed him in its acknowledgement section as principal founding sponsor, a phrase he had suggested himself the first year and which had appeared without discussion every year since. His photo accompanied a paragraph of biographical text on the About page that described him as a dedicated advocate for youth educational excellence in the Bay Area and broader Pacific Coast region. He moved through the atrium on Saturday morning with the unhurried ease of a man who finds his name on every surface he looks at and has long since mistaken the comfort of that familiarity for a form of ownership. He stopped to greet coaches by their first names. He nodded at parents with the specific warmth of a host who knows that the guests believe the event belongs to them but understands, quietly and completely, that it belongs to him. A father from one of the competing schools photographed him shaking hands with the tournament director. He accepted the photograph with practiced good nature. Gregory Hallowell was not the kind of man this story can dismiss quickly. The narrator is careful about this because the kind of man who is easy to dismiss is not the kind of man who does lasting damage. Gregory was intelligent. He was genuinely invested in this competition. He had sons of colleagues and children of clients who had competed here and benefited. He believed, in the self-satisfying and entirely sincere way of a man who has never been required to examine the architecture of his beliefs, that what he was doing for this tournament and for these students was good. That belief was not the problem. The problem was what lived underneath it, a complete and unchallenged certainty about which students deserved to be here and which had arrived in error. His son Ethan was 17. He was the defending regional champion, the top seed in this year's bracket, and a genuinely gifted debater. The narrator notes this precisely because the story that follows is not about Ethan's ability, which was real, but about something his father assumed was transferable between a preparation room at a private school and a kitchen table in East Oakland, and which was not. At 8:47 in the morning, a boy named Marcus Osei joined the registration line. He was 13 years old, attending Franklin Community Middle School in East Oakland. His school blazer was the standard navy issue, worn at both elbows, second button replaced with a slightly smaller one from something else, the replacement visible at arm's length if you were looking for it. His dress shoes were polished. His slacks were pressed. He carried a composition notebook, black cover, pages slightly swollen from use, held with both hands against his chest. Above its top edge, the corner of a folded paper was visible. The paper was his tournament registration confirmation, printed 4 weeks earlier and refolded along its original lines so many times that the creases had softened permanently, like the worn spine of a book. In his left breast pocket, folded to a small square and placed with careful intention, was a pair of reading glasses. They were not his. They were women's frames, dark tortoiseshell, one arm repaired with a small piece of clear tape at the hinge. They had belonged to his grandmother. Ida Osei had died 11 weeks before this Saturday morning. She had been 68 years old. She had been a retired civil rights attorney. She had argued 14 cases before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and won 11 of them. She had co-counseled on a housing discrimination case in 1991 that established a precedent still cited in federal decisions today. She had been, in the quiet and exacting way of people who never needed the room's recognition to know their own weight, one of the most consequential legal minds in the Western District of California in the second half of the 20th century. She had also been the person who taught Marcus to debate, not as a hobby, as a discipline. The same way she had learned it herself, which was with legal pads and evidence, and the specific conviction that the ability to construct and defend an argument in front of people who had already decided against you was not a competitive skill but a survival one. She had started when he was 9. Kitchen table on Ashby Avenue. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and sometimes Saturday mornings if he had a competition coming. She had a rule she stated at the beginning of every session, which he had memorized before he was 10. A fact without a structure is just a sound. An argument without evidence is just a preference. You are never going to walk into a room and have anyone hand you the benefit of the doubt. So you are going to learn to make the room see what you see. Then it will not matter what they hand you. Marcus had his first competition win at 10. His second and third at 11. His coach at Franklin, a meticulous and underpaid man named Mr. Adeyemi who had been running the school's debate program for 9 years on a stipend that bore no relationship to what he was worth, had entered Marcus in the Pacific Coast Regional Championship in September with a letter of nomination and a bracket registration form submitted 6 weeks before the tournament. He had also arranged to drive Marcus to the competition himself. Mr. Adeyemi had called Marcus at 6:30 that Saturday morning from his own apartment, where he had been lying down with a fever since Thursday. He was sorry. He had arranged a parent volunteer to drive Marcus to the school. He told Marcus to go anyway. He told him he was ready. He told him to do exactly what they had worked on. Marcus said yes, sir, and meant it completely. Ida Osei had planned to be in the audience that morning. She had told Marcus this in late July, sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea she had not finished. She died the following Saturday of a cardiac arrest, without warning, without time to arrange, while her daughter was at the market and Marcus was 3 blocks away at the public library. The library book he had been reading when the call came was still on his desk at home, a month overdue, because he had not been back to return it and no one had thought to ask him to. The composition notebook Marcus carried into the atrium had 43 pages of debate preparation notes he had written in the 11 weeks between Ida's death and this morning. On the inside front cover, in the deliberate block letters of a boy who writes as though words have weight and should be placed accordingly, was a single line, "For Grandma Ida. This one is yours." He had not told Mr. Adeyemi about the line. He had not told anyone. When Marcus reached the front of the registration line at 8:53, the volunteer coordinator, a Whitmore preparatory parent named Sandra who had managed registration for 4 years and knew the process completely, was about to take his name when Gregory Hallowell materialized at her elbow. He had been crossing the atrium. His eye had caught the boy in the line, the public school blazer, the composition notebook, the folded paper, in the way that certain things catch the eye of people who have organized their understanding of a room around a set of expectations when something doesn't fit those expectations. He had changed direction without fully deciding to. He looked at Marcus the way you look at something you have already catalogued and are now confirming. "You're here for the debate championship?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. Gregory looked over the blazer, the notebook, the worn shoes despite their polish, and he did what people like him do in those moments. He asked a question whose answer he had already decided. "This is the Pacific Coast Regional Championship. Schools submit nominations. This isn't an open enrollment event." "Yes, sir. Franklin Community submitted my nomination in September." "Franklin Community," Gregory said, with the particular pause that communicates recognition of a kind that has nothing to do with the place's academic record. "That's in East Oakland." "Yes, sir." A loose gathering of parents had drifted into earshot. Saturday morning in a school atrium. Movement brought witnesses, and witnesses brought the specific quality of attention that makes certain men perform. Gregory became, by several degrees, more expansive. "And your coach sent you here alone?" he said, in the tone of concern performing as interest. "Mr. Adeyemi is sick," Marcus said. "He told me to come. Do you have documentation?" Marcus set the notebook on the registration table and unfolded the confirmation. Sandra looked at it for 4 seconds. "He's registered," she said. "Bracket 4, round 1, 9:15. Gregory looked at the paper. He looked at the parents nearby who had been watching. He spread his hands in a small gesture of charitable concession. "Look," he said. "I'm sure you've worked hard to get here. There's a junior exhibition category through those doors that might be more appropriate for." "I'm registered for the regional competition," Marcus said. His voice was completely level. Not raised, not aggressive. The specific measured quality of a boy who had been taught that a clear sentence at low volume carries more weight than volume alone. Something shifted in Gregory's expression. Not much. Just enough to be visible to people who were watching carefully, and several people were. "The junior exhibition is right through that corridor," Gregory said, and gestured to the left. A laugh ran through the nearest cluster of parents. Brief, reflexive, the social sound a crowd makes when it has taken its cue from the person holding the room and decided, without deciding, to follow it. Marcus looked at Gregory, then at Sandra, who had already moved to the next person in line. He picked up the composition notebook, held it back against his chest with both hands, and walked toward the main competition hall. Gregory turned back to the nearest group of parents with a small, resigned expression, the look of a man managing a minor disruption with appropriate grace, and said something they laughed at again. Then he moved on. He had an opening address at 9 o'clock. He gave it. It went well. He had, by 9:15, entirely stopped thinking about the boy from East Oakland. He would not stop thinking about him again after 9:15. Marcus's first-round opponent was a 16-year-old from Pacific Ridge Preparatory who had won this bracket the previous year. The motion was environmental regulation. Marcus was assigned the negative. He opened without notes, cross-examined in 4 exchanges that the judging panel's written notes later described as precise, and won on a majority decision. His second round was against a 15-year-old from Marin Academy who was widely regarded by the tournament's coaching staff as the second most prepared competitor in the field. She argued beautifully. Marcus argued with a quality that the room could feel but not immediately name. The quality of someone who is not performing arguments but inhabiting them, the way his grandmother had inhabited them for 40 years in rooms that were not designed to listen to her either. The decision was unanimous. The semi-final was his tightest round. A well-prepared boy from Menlo whose delivery was polished and whose preparation was extensive pushed Marcus through 6 exchanges that produced the closest judging of the day. Marcus won 2-1. The judges' notes from round 3, written separately by 3 people who had not compared observations, each contained one shared observation expressed in different words. The boy from Franklin had a pause. A specific, chosen, timed pause before his rebuttals. No more than 3 or 4 seconds, during which the room seemed to understand that what was coming had weight, before it had arrived. One judge wrote, "It sounds like nothing to describe it, but in the room it was considerable." He had not learned it from a textbook. He had learned it at a kitchen table from a woman who had told him once that in a courtroom or a debate hall, the silence after your opponent finishes speaking belongs to you before you speak into it, and the room will hear what you do with it. By noon, the atrium held a different quality than it had at 9. Coaches from 3 competing schools had asked their team captains about the Franklin community boy. 2 parents had searched his bracket online. The bracket board near the competition hall doors showed Franklin Community Middle School, Osei advancing to the final with a clean record across 3 rounds. Gregory Hallowell saw the bracket board at 12:47. He stood in front of it for a long time without moving. Then he went to find Ethan. The final round began at 2 o'clock. The motion was, "This House believes that civil and legal institutions have consistently failed to deliver equal protection to Black Americans." Marcus was drawn to argue the affirmative. He stood at the left podium in the blazer with the loose button. The composition notebook was on the desk behind him, closed. He did not need it. In his left breast pocket, The folded reading glasses were exactly where he had placed them that morning. The room held 212 people. Among them, in a seat in the third row she had arrived early to claim, sat a woman named Justice Adele Marchetti. She was 72. She had retired from the Ninth Circuit 8 years earlier. She had driven from San Francisco that morning after seeing Marcus Osei's bracket results posted online by a coach she followed, and she had said nothing to anyone about coming. She had known his grandmother for 31 years, first as opposing counsel on a case she lost, then as co-counsel on the 1991 housing case they had worked on together for 14 months and won. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched the boy at the left podium look at the room, and she recognized in his expression something she had seen on the face of a woman at a kitchen table on Ashby Avenue, the particular settled quality of someone who is not performing confidence but is simply present in their own capability. Marcus's opening argument lasted 6 minutes. He did not use statistics as facts. He used them as evidence in service of a structure, the way his grandmother had taught him, which was the way she had practiced for 40 years, which was to say rigorously and without decoration. He cited 3 federal cases by name. He cited one of them by its docket number, which produced a small involuntary silence in the room, because docket numbers are not the language of 13-year-olds, and the room understood this without being told, and the understanding recalibrated something. Ethan Hallowell's opening was excellent. He was genuinely prepared and genuinely gifted, and in any previous final round he had competed in, it would have been more than enough. Today it was not enough. Ethan felt this, the way perceptive people feel when the room has shifted its weight without announcing the shift, and the awareness of it showed at the edges of his final sentences as something that was not fear but was adjacent to it. The cross-examination rounds ran 22 minutes. The room barely moved. Then the final rebuttals. Ethan spoke first. His rebuttal was precise and composed and argued from real intelligence. The room gave him applause that recognized ability because ability was what it had seen. Then Marcus stood. He took the pause. 3 seconds. 4. The room understood before he spoke that something was coming that had earned its arrival. He began with a case he had not mentioned in his opening. A housing discrimination case, decided in the Ninth Circuit in 1991, cited by its common name. He described its significance in 2 sentences, the way you describe something whose significance you have understood for a long time and feel no need to demonstrate. He explained how its precedent connected to the evidence his opponent had presented and why that connection, rather than undermining the affirmative case, confirmed it at a deeper level than either of them had reached so far. Then he said, "My grandmother argued that case. She stood in the Ninth Circuit and she made the court see what she saw. She told me once, at a kitchen table in East Oakland, not in a lecture hall, not in a practice room, at a kitchen table with a legal pad and a glass of iced tea, that the purpose of an argument is not to defeat the person across from you. The purpose is to make the room see something it has been looking away from. For a long time, and in many different rooms, certain people have been doing both of those things at once. Carrying the argument and carrying the proof that the argument is necessary. My grandmother did it for 40 years. She did it in rooms that were not built for her, before judges who had not expected her, with evidence that was precise enough that the room could not look away. That is the inheritance she left me, not the case. The method. The specific belief that if your argument is built correctly and your evidence holds, the room will eventually have to see what you are showing it. Even if the room laughed when you walked in. His voice held through this entirely, until the word iced, 1 syllable, attached to a specific kitchen in East Oakland on a specific Tuesday evening moved. Not broke. Moved. The difference between the two is the difference between loss that has overwhelmed you and grief that you are carrying with full awareness of its weight. Then the voice returned to its level, and Marcus finished, and the room did not breathe during the final 40 seconds. He sat down. He picked up the composition notebook and held it against his chest with both hands. He looked at the floor. The applause did not come immediately. 8 seconds. 9. The specific silence of a room that has been moved to a place where the usual immediate response feels like the wrong instrument for what has just happened. Then it came, not the polite sound of people acknowledging a performance, but the sound of people registering that something altered while they were watching. In the third row, Justice Adele Marchetti did not clap immediately. She looked at the boy with his notebook, and she pressed her lips together and looked briefly at the ceiling. Then she clapped with the rest. In the fifth row, Gregory Hallowell sat completely still. He was not looking at Ethan. He was looking at the boy from East Oakland, at the notebook held to his chest, at the left breast pocket where something small was folded and tucked. He sat with a stillness that was unfamiliar to him and an expression that belonged to a man whose private recalculation had not yet resolved and would not, he was beginning to understand, resolve quickly or cleanly. The judges deliberated for 14 minutes. The result was unanimous. Marcus Osei, Franklin Community Middle School, East Oakland. The tournament director, not Gregory Hallowell, who typically stood for this moment and who was still in his fifth row seat, presented the trophy. Marcus held it and looked at it for a moment, and then looked at the room, and said thank you into the microphone in a voice that had returned completely to its level. He walked back to his table and held the trophy under one arm and the notebook against his chest. Justice Adele Marchetti reached him before anyone else. She moved through the crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to rooms making way without being asked, and she stopped in front of him and he looked up at her. "My name is Adele Marchetti," she said. "I was your grandmother's co-counsel on the 1991 case you cited." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "She argued the oral," Justice Marchetti said. "I wrote the brief. We spent 14 months together on that case." She looked at him with the direct and unhurried attention of a person seeing two things at once. "I have been waiting to meet you for a long time. She spoke about you often, particularly in the last year." "What did she say?" Marcus asked. Justice Marchetti looked at him with the careful attention of someone choosing the right version of the truth from several available. "She said you had her arguments and her father's patience," she said, "and that the combination was going to be extremely inconvenient for a great many rooms." A pause. She was not wrong about either part. Marcus held the composition notebook against his chest. His grip on it tightened briefly, visible in the knuckles for a moment, and then released. "She didn't get to see today," he said. "No," Justice Marchetti said. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "She knew what today would look like," Justice Marchetti said. "She described it to me. In some detail." Another pause. The pause before the rebuttal. "She told me about that specifically. She said you had found it the way she found it, by accident and then by discipline." Gregory Hallowell approached at 3:47. Ethan was nearby, talking to his coach, not watching his father. Gregory stopped in front of Marcus with a posture entirely different from the morning's posture. The proprietary ease had gone from him. He had not yet found what would replace it. "You debated very well today," he said. "Thank you," Marcus said. "I apologize for this morning." He said it directly, in the flat register of a man who has concluded that a plain apology is the only option that does not make him worse than he already is. "I was wrong about what I said." Marcus looked at him. "I appreciate that," he said. Not warmly. Not coldly. With a level, receiving quality of a person who knows the difference between an apology that closes a door and one that begins a longer accounting, and who is choosing, in this moment, to receive it as the former. He had been taught to choose that. He had been taught which choosing served the work and which only served the feeling. Gregory nodded. He started to say something else and did not. He moved away. Justice Marchetti had watched from 2 feet away. "Your grandmother would have given him considerably more of a conversation," she said. "I know," Marcus said. "I'm not her yet." Justice Marchetti looked at him with the nearest thing she had shown to warmth all afternoon. "No," she said. "You're something still forming." She took a card from her jacket and placed it in his hand. "There is a summer law and argumentation program at Bolt Hall for students your age. Competitive. I sit on the selection committee." She held his gaze. "Apply before February. Bring the trophy. Bring the rebuttal written out in full." A pause. The distance between a case cited by a working attorney and the same case cited by the grandson of the attorney who argued it is not a small distance. I believe you already understand what that distance is. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. Good. She looked once more at the composition notebook. She would have sat in the back, she said quietly, half to herself. She always sat in the back so she could see the whole room. Then she moved through the crowd toward the exit with the same unhurried pace she had arrived with, and the room made way. In the 3 weeks that followed, the things that moved in institutions moved slowly and the things that moved everywhere else moved fast, which is the ordinary rhythm of justice when it finally moves. The recording, made by a 15-year-old girl from a competing school who had her phone out before Marcus's rebuttal and kept it running through the trophy presentation, reached 40,000 views by Monday morning and 160,000 by Wednesday. 3 debate coaches shared it with their teams. A journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle filed a story that ran the following Thursday. It described the registration line. It named Gregory Hallowell. It quoted 3 witnesses. Gregory's firm issued a statement expressing regret for any misunderstanding. The statement was on the record now. Records stay. The Hallowell and Associates sponsorship of the Pacific Coast Regional Championship came up for annual renewal in December. For the first time in 12 years, the organizing committee accepted proposals from multiple sponsors and distributed naming rights accordingly. The vote was 5-1. Gregory Hallowell was not on the organizing committee. He had chaired its advisory board for 8 years. He submitted his resignation from the advisory board in November, in a 1-paragraph letter that offered no explanation. The resignation was noted in a single line in the tournament's annual report. It would be there next year. It would be there the year after that. Things entered into the record stay in the record, which is a form of consequence this story considers both sufficient and appropriate. He was not ruined. He had a firm and a family and a practice and a son whose genuine ability at a podium owed nothing to his father's money and everything to his own preparation. He was wrong in the atrium at 8:47 and he knew it by 3:47 and he said so plainly and without decoration, and those words live only in his own memory now, which is exactly where they belong. The composition notebook had 47 pages by the end of October. Marcus had added 4 pages in the week after the tournament. The final entry on the last page, written at the kitchen table on Ashby Avenue on a Sunday evening 10 days after the competition, read, "She was right about the pause. Use it but don't own it. The pause belongs to the room." He had learned that from her. The Bolt Hall application was due in February. He worked on it for 6 weeks at the same table, in the same chair he had sat in since he was 9 years old, with a legal pad she had always used now serving as his scratch paper, and her handwriting visible on its back pages in the clear, decisive strokes of a woman who had been writing arguments for 40 years. The chair across from him was empty and had been empty for 11 weeks when he started and would be empty for longer still. He worked toward it anyway, with a specific quality of attention she had named for him once, at the table on a Thursday evening when he had been distracted and she had said, "There is only one kind of attention worth giving anything, which is the attention of a person fully present in the weight of the task, not the attention of a person waiting to be finished with it." He had written that down. It was on page 6 of the composition notebook. He submitted the application on a Thursday evening in February, from his phone, at the kitchen table, after dinner. He set the phone down and opened the composition notebook to the inside front cover. He read what he had written there 11 weeks ago, before the tournament, before the atrium, before the rebuttal and the trophy and the woman in the third row who had known his grandmother and recognized something in his face. He did not add anything to the front cover. It had said what it needed to say. If this story found you today, in whatever corridor you were told to find the other entrance, whatever room laughed before you had the chance to speak, subscribe to Noir Resurgence, like this video, and leave one word in the comments that describes Marcus Osei. Just one. We read every single one. See you at the next one.